In the shimmering heart of Manhattan, where dreams either soared above the skyline or were crushed beneath the polished soles of the elite, 14-year-old Emily Peterson stood awkwardly near the velvet curtains of the Marriott Grand Ballroom, clutching her worn sketchbook like a shield, her fingers fidgeting with its corners while her eyes scanned the room with quiet intensity, not quite meeting anyone's gaze yet absorbing everything. She wasn't supposed to be here, not among CEOs, inventors, and media moguls. But fate had a different plan, for her single mother Grace, a catering staff member, had brought her along after her babysitter cancelled, hoping Emily could stay quietly in the back while she worked, but life doesn't always follow the rules, especially when hearts are brave and destinies unspoken, and so it was that Emily, who had autism and often found spoken words a tangled forest of confusion, stood on the brink of something greater than anyone in that grand hall could imagine, while billionaires chatted over champagne and dismissive chuckles, blind to the magic waiting quietly at the edge of their world, as the stage lights lit up and the host of the Future Titans Conference, a glossy tech summit celebrating innovation, announced an impromptu Genius Pitch Challenge, with a $1 million prize for the most groundbreaking idea. Emily watched as the crowd buzzed with excitement, and the first to ascend the stage was none other than Preston Royce, a billionaire app mogul infamous for his arrogance, who adjusted his platinum cufflinks and pitched a sleek, soulless concept about replacing human empathy with predictive AI to streamline social friction, drawing robotic applause from a room too eager to please wealth to question the ethics, and when the host asked if anyone else wished to present, silence loomed like a thick fog until, suddenly, a quiet yet firm hand rose in the back, Emily's. And the crowd turned with mixed confusion and curiosity, whispers spreading like wildfire as this thin, nervous girl with tangled brown hair and oversized sneakers walked slowly toward the stage, her sketchbook pressed to her chest like armor, and as she reached the mic, Preston smirked, leaned back, and muttered just loud enough for the front rows to hear, "Oh great, a charity act. What's next, a bake sale pitch," causing a few guests to laugh. Not out of cruelty, but that strange cocktail of discomfort and cowardice, yet Emily, her face pale but steady, opened her book, cleared her throat, and spoke, softly, haltingly at first, but with the kind of fragile bravery that silences even the cruelest minds. "I want to build something that helps the world listen, really listen, to people like me," she said, her voice like a trembling violin string. "I call it Echo Heart. It's not about fixing autism. It's about understanding it. This device would take how people like me experience the world, through patterns, sounds, emotions, and turn that into music, a kind of language of the soul, so others can hear us without making us change who we are." And for a heartbeat, the entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath, the chandeliers flickering like stars pausing mid-twinkle, and then Preston clapped slowly, sarcastically, rising from his seat and saying, "Adorable. But let's get back to real ideas, shall we? This isn't therapy hour," and the host, clearly unsure how to respond, awkwardly gestured toward the next participant, but before Emily could be ushered off stage, a new voice rang out, clear, authoritative, and female. "Wait," said Dr. Amelia Rhodes, a world-renowned neuroscientist and venture capitalist, rising from her seat near the back. "I think this young woman just presented the most important idea I've heard in years," and suddenly, all eyes turned to her as she made her way to the stage, standing beside Emily and continuing, "We've spent billions trying to force neurodivergent people to adapt to a world that refuses to understand them. Emily is suggesting we adapt the world to them. That's not just innovative, that's revolutionary." And as murmurs of agreement swelled, the tone of the room began to shift, curiosity replacing condescension, respect blooming in the wake of realization, and what followed was a floodgate of support. Investors, scientists, educators, even artists coming forward to offer resources, advice, and belief, and within weeks, a prototype of Echo Heart was under development with Emily not as a mascot but as the creative director, working side by side with engineers and sound designers to create a device that translated emotional and sensory input into immersive, melodic compositions that users could wear, share, and interpret. And when the first field test occurred at a special needs school in Brooklyn, the results were staggering. Children who had never spoken aloud now smiled and danced as their Echo Heart melodies played, and parents wept as they heard the unique beauty of their child's internal world expressed through personalized sound, like lullabies from a hidden language finally spoken. And at the International Tech Expo 6 months later, Emily, now 15, her confidence growing like a sunrise, stood on the main stage, echo heart in hand, and addressed a crowd of thousands, her speech still hesitant in delivery but thunderous in message. "We don't need to be fixed. We need to be heard," she said, and the ovation that followed shook the very walls. Meanwhile, Preston Royce, after facing severe public backlash for his comments and several investors pulling out of his ventures in solidarity with Emily, issued a video apology, which Emily responded to not with bitterness, but a single tweet: "Understanding starts with listening. Thank you for trying," and that tweet, humble and healing, was shared around the world as a symbol of grace and maturity, eventually being painted on the walls of classrooms, libraries, and tech labs as a reminder of what true innovation looks like: not greed, not ego, but empathy. And in the year that followed, EchoHeart became more than a product. It became a movement, sparking new discussions in schools about neurodiversity, prompting companies to rethink accessibility, and inspiring other neurodivergent teens to dream without apology. And through it all, Emily remained her quiet, reflective self, more comfortable sketching soundscapes than giving interviews, more focused on helping others find their voice than basking in her own spotlight. But her influence was undeniable, culminating in her being invited to address the United Nations on World Autism Awareness Day, where she stood beneath 100 flags and shared a simple but profound truth: difference doesn't mean deficit. It means discovery. And by then, her mother Grace, who had left her catering job to run the EchoHeart Foundation full-time, watched proudly from the wings, tears in her eyes as her daughter's message touched global leaders, educators, and families alike. And perhaps the most touching moment came during a small gathering in Seattle, where a boy named Jacob, nonverbal and 6 years old, wore his EchoHeart for the first time and produced a melody so hauntingly beautiful that his mother fell to her knees in awe, whispering, "That's him. That's my baby's voice." And across the country, thousands more had similar moments. Teachers understanding students for the first time, siblings connecting without words, communities celebrating differences as gifts rather than burdens. And Emily, now 16, continued her work not to chase fame but to share light, always remembering the night she stood trembling on a stage where she wasn't welcome, and turned mockery into a mission, silence into a song, and prejudice into progress. And as she sat one evening beneath the stars with her mother, sketching future ideas in her notebook, she asked softly, "Do you think people really change?" And Grace, brushing a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear, smiled and replied, "I think when they hear something that touches their soul, they do." And with that, Emily nodded and added a final note to her sketch: "Let the world hear your heart, even if your voice trembles, especially then." And in those quiet, echoing words lived the heartbeat of a new world. One where compassion led, courage inspired, and every human, no matter how different, was finally, gloriously heard.